Hi everyone, I'm Hoodie Angel Brandon, and I recently finished Fire Emblem Engage. A bit late, I know, but I thought it would be fun to sit down and rank the characters based off of my initial impressions of them. This is of course based off of just one run. I didn't use every character throughout the whole run, but I did use most of them at least a little bit, and I also saw everyone's supports with at least a Lear. So I can give at least my initial thoughts on each character based off of their design, a little bit of their combat, and at least a bit of their character. These rankings could of course change in the future if I do additional runs, but I thought it would be fun to see how I viewed all these characters initially after just one run. And we could also kind of consider this a video of more or less how interested I am in getting these characters and eventually building them once they come to Fae, at least as a rough guide or estimate. But real quick before we get started, I just want to say that if you enjoy this Engage content and you want some more, I also had the opportunity to be part of an Engage themed art video over on Tane's channel, and so it would mean a lot if you guys went and checked that out as well. I'll include links in the description down below and at the end of the video. Thank you so much. And finally, real quick, I just want to say that while I will try and be vague, there will inevitably be some spoilers, especially for late game characters. So with that in mind, this is your spoiler warning. And with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start with the playable characters and go in order of their countries, and then we'll come back for NPCs at the end. So starting things off with our protagonist, the Divine Dragon Alear. Like many people, when we first saw this design, I was not that enthusiastic about it. It looks pretty goofy. I really wasn't wild about the two-tone hair, which I think is kind of emblematic of a lot of the character designs in this game, where they're kind of silly and over the top, which initially made me very not hyped for this game. Certainly not as much as I was for Three Houses release. With that said, Alear ended up being shockingly great, actually. Of course, I'm known for my love of Avatar characters, and I guess Alear was no exception. I ended up enjoying them immensely. Professor Byleth is of course my favorite character in the entire franchise, and while Alear didn't quite reach that same lofty height, I did end up enjoying them immensely. Their hair is still a little goofy, but I'm happy to see that there's actually a plot reason for that, and it wasn't just weird and wild for the sake of making a character design that stood out. And as a character themselves, I really enjoyed how supportive and kind they were, and there were a lot of aspects of the character that I found myself relating to. I won't get into that too much for the sake of spoilers, but I just ended up really enjoying Alear, and I enjoyed their arc, even if at points the pacing of said arc felt a little rushed. Overall, I can happily place our newest avatar up in S tier. I'm actually genuinely shocked by this one. I did not expect to like Alear very much. I anticipated like a B ranking at best, but no, I ended up liking Alear way more. Eventually, I would very much be interested in plus 10ing the male version. I'm not sure if I'll go for the first version that pops up though. I may wait and see if we get a seasonal demo or maybe a different version. There is one version that I could see happening that I would be especially interested in trying to plus 10 over the base version, but we'll just have to see. Starting off the stewards, we have Clan. While I did mention that a lot of the designs were initially off-putting to me, I actually was immediately drawn to Clan and Fram's designs in particular. They're pretty interesting designs without being too over the top. I felt like their outfits were fairly normal. So when I was going through and looking at which characters I thought I might enjoy, these two especially stuck out. And Clan was the one that I slightly preferred, and he ended up being great. He was absolutely fantastic. I know most people probably bench all the stewards because they're your standard early game characters that aren't supposed to be super crazy or memorable or anything, but Clan was awesome. He was my MVP on 20 maps. Giving him Celica's ring just let him zoom all over and nuke things. I know that there are more optimal options, but who cares about that? We had a good boy doing good work, and I love and appreciate him for that. He is definitely also an S tier character for me. I would love to see him in Fae, although I'm honestly not expecting him to pop up anytime soon. Since they straight up skipped the stewards for the first banner, even though they would have been very easy to put in there, I don't think we'll see him for a long time. But when he does, he'll probably be a demote mage, and that'll make him an awesome merge project down the line. I hope to see him soon. As for his sister Fram, she was also awesome. Not nearly as strong, but still very helpful. She is your early game staff bot, and so she offers some good support. She also is a Key Adept, which is a new class which has some good utility in protecting your allies, especially earlier on. And similar to Clan, I really liked her design. Her personality is a fun contrast to his being the more peppy, excitable character, to his more shy bookworm type. But I really enjoyed both of them and how supportive of Alear they are. I do wish they weren't quite as basic, but she is another S tier character for me. Even if she is a standard infantry staff demote, I would still be very excited to have her join the Angel Army. Again, I really appreciated the more grounded design of these characters. Just so many of the characters are in over-the-top outfits like Hortensia, and they all look a lot better in their more casual clothes. Like, why were their regular outfits so wild? I don't really get it, but Clan and Fram being fairly grounded was something that I really appreciated in a cast of pretty wacky character designs. Finally, rounding out the stewards is Vander, who is your standard early game pre-promote and probably the character most benched by people, I would imagine. And I actually ended up loving him too. As shocking as this is, I really liked him. He's very cool. He's basically the team dad. Although he acts more like the team grandpa. He's constantly acting like he's got one foot in the grave already, which is a little sad, but I really enjoyed Vander. I know that he is objectively bad, but I still took him with me to endgame. I gave him like a +5 killer axe, and that did fix him. It was probably a little overkill, but boy, he crit most things, so that was funny. I really enjoyed him also supporting Alear, being kind of the team dad, and I also liked that he got a little bit of plot armor and cutscene relevance, and actually got to show up in some of the late game cutscenes, even though it was a very minor role. It made me happy to see Papa Vander get some screen time, so shockingly, another S tier. I promise there will be characters in other tiers, but I really was surprised at how much I enjoyed all the stewards, and I think that's probably a unique opinion and something that made my run a little different from most people's, but I would happily +10 any of the stewards. Moving on to Firene, we start with the Crown Prince Alfred, or as I like to call him, Clown Dimitri. His design is kind of similar to Dimitri, but a bit more circus is how I would describe it. It's a little fanciful and a little wild compared to Dimitri's. And Alfred actually is in Fae, so I got to know him a little bit before I even started the game, and he's alright. I did use him a lot early game, but he wasn't ever especially great, and I ended up benching him around chapter 11 or 12. So I didn't use him the whole run. I just don't especially love his whole obsession with muscles, even though I get it based off of his backstory and everything. It's just not a character trait that I especially like or anything, but I do like the kind of connection he has with Alear and how he's kind of treated as Alear's first friend. Overall, he's an okay character. I'd say I like him a little above average, but he is definitely not my favorite. I would say he's about like a B tier. I could see maybe using him again in a future run, but he's not someone who I would especially jump over myself to make space for on a team. For his retainers, we have Etier and Boucheron, and let's start with Etier. So she kind of has the same issue with Alfred, where her character trait is I like muscles, which again, I'm not wild about muscle heads, but I think she leans into that heavier than Alfred, who is also kind of a prince, so he has that as a trait to lean back on. Etier's just kind of like all muscle all the time, based off of what I've seen from her, and I just really didn't enjoy that. It's a little unfortunate because I think her design is actually kind of cute. I was initially kind of interested in her when I saw her in Faye, but once I actually got to see her as a character, I just didn't really like her that much. So I think that she's going to be our first D tier character. She's not outright obnoxious or a character that I can't stand, so she's not an F tier, but I just really don't like much about her. Even in terms of design, I think there are other characters I like way more off of design, so that doesn't even really help her much. As for Boucheron, or as I like to call him, Boucheron, I don't know why. I just think his name is really fun to pronounce that way. Boucheron, Boucheron. Anyway, he's a big muscle guy in contrast to his two partners who want to be big muscle characters. But he is more of a gentle giant, kind of crybaby, sensitive soul kind of character, and I ended up liking him more than I expected. A decent amount, but he still ended up not being a character that I loved or anything. I did use him a lot earlier on when he was my only backup unit, and I think I benched him around the same time I benched Alfred, which was like chapter 11, 12, when I started to get more options. But early game, he's very, very helpful, and I could actually see building a run around his pref skill, which encourages a lot of backup spam. So I kind of like him, but he's another character that I probably wouldn't trip over myself to plus 10 in Faye or anything. So I would say I like him about average, so he's going to go in C tier. Next, we have Alfred's sister, Princess Saline, who I actually kept thinking was the older sister for some reason. I guess it's because she acts more mature than Alfred. I just kind of thought like, oh yeah, she's the next in line to rule, right? But no, she is apparently Alfred's younger sister, and she is okay. I think she's actually got kind of an interesting character from what I saw in her support with Alir, but I kind of instantly benched her because I just stole her ring and gave it to Clan. She has Celica's ring, and I just was like, nope, that's Clan's, and he's going to use that, and you are going to sit on the bench. So my perception of her is probably a little skewed by the fact that I just kind of benched her after the, I think I used her for 2 maps, but I benched her pretty early on. I did see her entire support with Alir, and it does offer some depth, so I'd be interested to see some more of her, but the biggest thing I dislike about her is her design. Her casual clothes are, again, really nice, actually. A lot of the characters just have really nice casual outfits, but then their regular outfits are just so goofy, and her dress is massive and defies gravity, and I really dislike it. I don't know. There's some interesting stuff here, and then there's some stuff that I'm just really not wild about, and I think that kind of balances out, and that's going to land her in C tier as well. As for her retainers, we have Chloe and Louis, and Chloe did not make a good first impression on me. The first thing that she says in her Faye reveal trailer is talking about eating eyeballs, which is gross. I did not appreciate that. Her whole thing with the folk food and trying to eat weird stuff just really did not resonate with me. It's a shame. I actually kind of like the fairy tale gimmick she has going on. I wish they had leaned more into that than the weird folk food thing, because the fairy tales don't gross me out. Beyond that, she's kind of a standard blue-haired Pegasus girl that we see a lot in Faye, so very uninterested there as well. There are some things that I actually kind of did like about Chloe, but overall there's just not anything that makes me too excited. I'm gonna put her down in D tier. As for her fellow retainer, Louis, or as I call him, Creepy Louis, I do not like this guy. He is creepy, that is why I call him that. He likes to sit around and stare at people, and his pref skill is basically fetishize lesbians. Maybe that's a little harsh, but that was the first thing that I thought when I read his pref skill. I was like, dude, why are you doing that? Don't do that, please. So yeah, I know he's like your armor unit and a lot of people actually like him, but for me, he's unsettling to me and I just really don't like him that much. He also goes in D tier. Finally, rounding out the Firene cast is our optional recruit and trainee unit, Jean. And I actually liked him a lot. He's got a nice design. His character of just wanting to be a doctor and trying his best to help people is a little basic, but very nice. Very supportive character. And he is a staff bot, which automatically makes him useful, especially early game when you're probably struggling a bit more to keep your units alive. So he ended up finding an easy spot on my team. I also kind of liked his support with clan, so any character that has a nice support with clan probably gets bonus points. So while not a especially mind-blowing character, I wish, kind of like Clan and Fram, that he had a little bit more going on in his personality, but what is there is nice, and I'm gonna put him in A tier. Kind of like Fram, I could definitely see him being an easy staff demote, and I would consider trying to find a place for him, but he's probably not an instant guaranteed unit like Fram would be for me. Moving on to Mighty Brodia, we start with Crown Prince Diamant, who in the trailers I was immediately kind of like, oh, I'm not gonna like this guy. He's gonna be like he's from the Kingdom of Might. He's gonna be like the big, strong muscle guy, and he's gonna be all about being tough and probably be like toxic masculinity. And I was like, I'm not gonna like this guy. And that's not Diamant at all. He is a really level-headed character. I expected him to be kind of like a brash kind of guy who just kind of rushes in and tries to just beat his enemies into submission, but he's very level-headed. He's cautious. He really cares about his people, and he wants to actually do away with Brodia's kind of toxic mindset of might makes right. And I think that's so fascinating for him to just be next in line for the throne, but so against everything that his country stands for, while still loving his country and genuinely caring about it and wanting to work to change that. So he pretty much ended up exactly the opposite of everything I expected him to be, and it was just so refreshing and so cool to see. And yeah, he ended up being a surprise standout fave, and that earns him a pretty easy A tier. I know that he's a very well-liked character, and I can definitely see why. I'm definitely expecting him to take first next year in male's side of Choose Your Legends, and I will actually be pretty okay with that. And I would be very interested in plus 10ing him eventually, and we'll have to see, but I might work on his Brave version over time. It won't be a situation where I go all in day one trying to plus 10 him or anything, but I could see him being a long-term goal, kind of like Brave Dimitri is for me currently. For his retainers, we have Amber, the alpaca guy. He is wacky and over the top. He is what I honestly expected more of the cast to be. There are a lot of wacky moments from the cast, but Amber kind of ramps that up to 11, and he is kind of goofy, but it kind of works with his personality. And he also has a design that I kind of like, so that helps. And the alpaca thing is just kind of cute. I can kind of relate to that because I really like sheep. Those are my favorite animal. They're not quite the same, but I can kind of relate to just having a love for a fluffy animal. So Amber's silly. He's not too serious. I didn't use him too much, but if I weren't using like Vander, I probably would have taken Amber as my Cav unit. I like him a little more than Alfred, in fact. So for that, he's going to get a B rank as well. And he's also going to be above Alfred. And for Diamant's other retainer, we have Jade, the Loyal Knight. And I'm very mixed on her. Her design is one of the more grounded ones like Clan and Fram, which I kind of appreciate, but she's also just fully decked out in armor, so it's also kind of maybe a little too far in the other direction of being a little too boring, I think. Even her casual clothes are very subdued, and kind of bland, but that does kind of, funny enough, go the opposite direction and make her stand out in a cast where so many of the characters have kind of wacky designs. So I think she's a little boring, but it's not necessarily a bad thing because it does kind of ground her amongst the rest of the cast. As for her personality, she likes to write, which I was immediately interested in, and I started passively giving her gifts to raise her support rank because I also write, so I was interested in that. And then her entire support with Alear does not touch on that, and I found that very disappointing. I'm sure it comes up more in her other supports, but I was so kind of like disappointed in that I just didn't even bother after that. She's also an armor, so she's not the most thrilling unit to bring along. And she also has a quirk where everything she does in the Somnial, she kind of narrates, which I was like, haha, that's funny. And then she kept doing it, and it eventually just kind of got grating. I was like, okay, girl, I get it. You're a writer. I'm also a writer. I don't narrate everything I do. You can stop now. So it kind of annoyed me, honestly. So overall, I'm pretty mixed on her, and I think that kind of balances out, and I'm just going to throw her in C tier. For the second Prince of Brodia, and the one that he would call lesser, is Alchrist. And he has a design that I was much more interested in than Diamant, and his personality is kind of reminiscent of like Bernie, where he's very anxious, but for different reasons. His is actually pretty understandable given how well-beloved Diamant is, that he would so constantly compare himself to Diamant. And so I found that pretty believable, but I do think it's a little turned up too much. I wish he wasn't as kind of wacky with how over the top his self-deprecation is. And another thing that's really wacky and over the top that I really disliked was on his initial appearance, he does this over the top running towards you thing, and then he does a big comical bow. And I just was just like, yeah, this is goofy. It kind of just took me out of the story. I didn't really like that, but overall I did enjoy Alchrist. Even though I had those complaints, I think he's got good supports with a lot of the cast, and in particular the way he initially reacts with the Illusian characters is pretty interesting and very like understandable given the moment, so I think that added some depth to his character. I think I would put him with his brother up in A tier. For his retainers, we have Lapis, who was one of the characters I was most intrigued by going into the game. She has a cute design. It is actually pretty reminiscent of Sakura, and I just didn't end up liking her as much as I initially thought I would. She's okay, but like her initial impression where she's just kind of like glaring at your group when they're the ones who attacked you, it kind of off-put me a little. And in her first map where I used her, she didn't do a whole lot, so I wasn't terribly impressed, and I just kind of ended up benching her, especially because you get Diamant like right after, and they both do swords, so I was like, I've already got Alear, I've got Diamant, I don't need another sword right now. So I don't think she's bad. I liked her support. It ended up making me like her a little bit more. It wasn't anything that stood out too much, but I think that she can go and chill in B tier. As for her fellow retainer Citrine, she's just kind of boring. She's like a rich girl. She has like a cute support with Alear, but I wouldn't ever pick her as a mage over like Clan or Ivy. I think she's the character I find the most forgettable. She doesn't have a super annoying gimmick, so there's nothing that I really hate about her, and there are definitely characters that I like less than her, but she also doesn't have anything that really stood out to me. So I think Citrine just kind of goes in C tier. There's nothing wrong with her, but there's nothing that I really loved either. For additional Brodia characters, we have the Loyal Knight Saphir, who is one of the last characters that you actually get, and I think she kind of suffers for that. She comes at the end when you're pretty much solidified on your team. She doesn't stand out as much as the few characters that come after her, and you probably aren't going to make room for her on your team because honestly, I think most people would have forgotten about her by then, And I think her excuse for joining you is kind of weak. I think she honestly needed to join about 8 or 9 chapters earlier to really be a character that people would be super excited about. But it's a shame because I actually liked her support with Alear a lot. I don't think she's a super crazy character, but I would go ahead and put her in C tier. She's fine. She's just really kind of hurt by late join time, I think. And finally, for Brodia, we have Miss Yunaka, who is apparently the surprise breakout hit. A lot of people really love her, and I can kind of see why. She's fun, energetic, quirky, but she's also kind of got like a sad past and everything. So I see why people really love her. She's also got a pretty nice design. I like the star aesthetic. With that said, I don't love her as much as a lot of people do. I carried her for a few maps and I ended up benching her when I got more options, but I could definitely see running her. So I would put her in B tier. She's not my favorite, but I know that a lot of people really love her. I'm expecting her to be one of the winners for the female side on CYL next year. I would consider plus 10ing a cop if we got her as like a Grail unit, but otherwise, I think that she's a cool character, but not one that I would go out of my way for. For Lucia, we have Princess Ivy, who initially I expected to be basically the Camilla of this game. Of course, she does look along the lines of Camilla in the sense of being a fan service character, and I expected her to be like strong and confident like Camilla. But in terms of actual personality, Miss Ivy is kind of a mess, and I love her. She's scared. She's not super confident, but she's a really cool character. Yeah, I originally wasn't too excited about her or Diamant. I was planning to bench both of them, but like Vander, these are characters that I was surprised I really ended up liking. Miss Ivy definitely goes in A tier. She's another CYL frontrunner, and again, it's easy to see why. I've seen people call her a girl flop, and yeah, I kind of agree, but I think that just makes her more endearing. She's also a super strong unit. She has strong magic options. She can still support with staves, and she is a flyer, so a lot of things to like about Miss Ivy. Funny enough, she was one of the units that got MVP a lot. She was tied for 3rd. Clan was, again, like around 20. Alear had 6, and then Ivy was tied for 3rd with 5 MVP wins. So definitely no slouch in battle. Again, similar to Diamant, I'd be interested in maybe a plus 10, maybe of her Brave version, but if she ended up with like a rearmed tome that was really good, I could see maybe going for her as rearmed fodder and ending up with a plus 10 Ivy that way instead. But we'll have to see. Either way, I was surprised by how much I ended up liking Miss Ivy. Also, I really like the fact that she rebelled against her family by just being petty and being like, well, they support this deity, so I'm going to support the opposite. I don't know, that's very funny, and that speaks a lot to me as someone who would probably do something similar just due to having a kind of contrary nature. I really found that amusing, and it's another thing that I liked about her. The only thing I really dislike about Ivy is the thing on her face. It's weird. Apparently it's called a fascinator. It certainly is fascinating. I don't know if it's fascinating for the right reasons, but yeah, that was the thing that I didn't really like about her design at first. It's kind of grown on me, but it's interesting. As for her retainers, she has Zelkov and Kagetsu. Starting off with Zelkov, he is a very interesting character. He likes to emphasize certain words to suggest a deeper meaning. I don't know, I didn't really get his whole character quirk when I first met him. I thought it was really weird, but he has a like shockingly good support with Alear. I ended up liking it a lot. It was very cute. He's a very interesting character. He's pretty lovable, and he's someone I could see running on a future run if I really needed dagger units. I don't know, I think a lot of the dagger units I ended up liking, but I didn't really like daggers in this game very much. I think the poison mechanic just wasn't something I was too interested in, so most of my dagger units ended up benched, but a lot of them were characters that I ended up liking that just didn't barely make the cut, but I'd put him in like B tier. high B tier for sure, but he just kind of didn't get enough use from me personally for me to form a super strong attachment to him, but I think he's a very cool character at least. As for Kagetsu, he's like the fast Myrmidon character, but he kind of has the same issue I had with Lapis, where he comes and Alir's already using swords, Diamant's already using swords, and so it's a little difficult for him to stand out. He's probably faster than both of those options though, so he probably has more of a niche than Lapis. And I did like his personality, his voice was fun, kind of just energetic sword guy, which is a neat spin on the trope. I feel like your like kind of Myrmidon characters are more of a lone swordsman or a I exist to fight the strongest and kind of edgy type characters. So he went the complete opposite direction, and I found that very refreshing. I'd put him right next to Zelkov. They're both B tier. I think I like Zelkov slightly more, but they're both really cool characters that I kind of wish I had more slots so that I could have used them. But they're both interesting and I do like them. Oh boy. So next up is Hortensia. Princess Ivy is the crown princess of Elusia, and Hortensia is the clown princess. Her design is very circus, is how I would describe it. Again, kind of like Alfred, but even more so, taken up to 11. I think she's got one of, if not the most out there designs of the cast. It's very over the top, and I did not like her very much at first. Okay, so kind of minor spoiler, she ends up with Byleth's ring, okay? Like, that's a borderline unforgivable offense to me. I was ready to grab her by her pretzel hair and hurl her off the Somniel, because you don't mess with Byleth, okay? That's my guy. And surprisingly, she had a pretty good support. I got her supports with both Ivy and Alir, and both of them were really sweet, actually. And that warmed me up a bit on her. Like, a shocking amount. I was ready when I first met her. I was ready to be like, yeah, she's an F tier character. But those supports really redeemed her. She ended up being a very surprisingly sweet character. I think she has good character growth, even if it is only locked in those supports. But the way she matures is actually really sweet. I liked it a lot. I still didn't really want to use her. She is one of only 2 characters I didn't use in any battles. So there's that, but she is apparently the strongest staff unit in the game. Her special class has an ability to not use staves at all, which could be very powerful, I would imagine, especially if you're doing like speed runs and trying to abuse warp staffs and stuff. Anyway, I ended up liking her way more than I expected. She didn't suddenly become my favorite royal, but I came to appreciate her more than I expected I would. And for that, she actually gets a shockingly high placement of C. As for her retainers, Rosado and Goldmary. Let's start with Goldmary. Alright, so Hortensia's group's whole thing is being cute, which is a claim that I find questionable, especially with Goldmary. I don't think she's especially cute. I don't think she's especially charming. There's nothing there that I thought was super adorable compared to her teammates, and especially compared to the female cast in general. I thought she just wasn't that adorable or really that endearing. Her gimmick of like trying to get everyone's attention and praise and kind of crying about it kind of reminds me of like Charlotte, with maybe a little bit of Hilda trying to get people to do things for her. But I don't know, I didn't really like it that much. I think Hilda has the funnier way of going about things, and I don't like Charlotte very much at all, so she ended up much closer to Charlotte, and it just ended up not being a thing that I really enjoyed. I do think her support with Alir is kind of sweet towards the end, but so that kind of salvages her a little bit. And I don't think her design is like atrocious. I just don't think it's that cute or memorable. She's just kind of basic, honestly. So I put her in D tier. I didn't really like her that much. I didn't completely hate her or anything, but she's a lower liked character for sure for me. And then we have, rounding out the air quote cute trio, we have Rosado, who is actually the only cute one of the group. I loved Rosado. Oh my goodness, he's adorable. He's like Forrest in that he's a guy who really likes cute things, and I really appreciate that they added another character like that. That's a character type that I resonate with a lot. I'm a guy who likes cute things. I like trying to be cute, and so Rosado was a natural fit for me. And he was the third character tied with Miss Ivy, who got the most MVP wins at 5. So he was also putting in a lot of work on my runs. I gave him a killer lance, and he just tore into most things. And he is also the character that I chose to S-support Alir with. So I think it's safe to say that I have a very high opinion on Rosado. He is one of the characters I'm most looking forward to. I think I still liked Clan a little more, but I think that might just be because I had more time with him. Rosado is one of the later recruits that you get, so that kind of holds him back a little bit. And I had so much fun with Clan warping around the map with Celica's ring and blowing things up that I think that gives him a slight edge. But Rosado is a top 3 character. I think I like him also slightly less than Alir, but Alir's got that avatar bias, and he also gets the benefit of having more spotlight due to being the main character, so that kind of elevates him. But overall, Rosado is great. Oh, I almost forgot. I also love the fact that he's like an artist and he loves to draw things, and that's just super adorable. Yeah, there's just so much to like about Rosado. The only thing I really disliked was his initial introduction where he's kind of trash talking you and he's like, oh, you guys aren't cute at all. And then it's really funny when you S-support him with Alir and he's like, okay, actually you're the cutest person in my life. I'm like, aw, character development. And speaking of kind of related, but when you S-support a character, you get a memento item that actually goes in your room, which I thought was super cool. That was such a cute little detail that they really didn't have to include at all. I really liked that. And I guess also, since we're on the subject of S-supports, the S-support images in this game were much more varied than the past games, with like different backgrounds and stuff. And I thought it was pretty cool. It was interesting that they didn't use the same background like they did for like Three Houses and Awakening. And it made them feel more unique compared to previous games. And some of them were really stunning, but some were also a bit plain. So I think it was kind of a mixed bag on that approach, but overall I liked it. I think I do still prefer Three Houses S-support backgrounds, but overall it was interesting. That's kind of unrelated, but I just kind of wanted to talk about that as well, because probably won't get another chance to mention that. Alright, I actually almost forgot this guy, which probably speaks to how much I cared about him. It's Lyndon. He's one of the later recruits, which does not do him any favors. By that point, you probably have your units rounded out, and like Hortensia, he is one of the only characters I didn't actually use in battle at all. I still got his supports passively, and his initial support with Alir, I really didn't like the idea of burning off my character's hair. That made me very upset. My hair is precious to me, and so I will take umbrage with anyone who attempts to hurt my hair. So he's kind of a weird character. He's always talking about like experimenting. I do kind of like the fact that he really embraces failure and takes it as part of the learning process, but he's just a little too out there for me, I think. And the fact that he joins so late means you don't really see a ton of him. I did also get his support with Vander, because I thought it would be funny to see the two older guys interact. And his support with Vander is actually surprisingly good, and talks about how they want to use their age to be mentors to the younger cast of characters. So I kind of appreciated that, and I think that support kind of salvages him from being D tier, so I'm going to put him in low C tier. But seriously, don't touch my hair, dude. Just don't. Leave me alone. Finally, last of the Elusian characters is Lady Anna. I do not like Anna. I do not like Anna in any game that she's in. Yeah, I don't. I think that they are the most one-note characters. Every single support is money, money, money. I knew going in that I would not like Anna. I do not like Anna now that you made her a child. So, yeah. In fact, the only thing that I would say that I like about this Anna is that she does not have the same voice actress as the other Annas, and that saves her from being F tier. Barely. She is the bottom tier character in the game, okay? I do not like Anna. Moving on. Okay, sorry I got a little heated there, but I guess that's fitting because next we are headed to the harsh, hot deserts of Solm, the nation of freedom, which is probably the kingdom trait that I would be most aligned to. I appreciate the concept of freedom. Maybe that's because Mondstadt is my favorite region in Genshin, but who knows. Anyway, starting things off, we have Princess Tamara. And while being the last of the royals to join, she gets the least kind of development of the characters. I think she's also kind of the royal who kind of knows what they're about the most. I think that she just fully embraces the concept of going out, doing what she wants, being free, and taking care of her people. And she has a very hands-on approach, which is really unique, I think, from the other royals. And I really appreciate that. I think she's cool, and also she is an incredible tank. I was originally not sold on her or her emblem, and I was like, yeah, okay, they're kind of squishy for being a tank. They still get broken, so like an armor unit is probably better. But after getting like a few levels on both her and her bond rank, she ended up becoming a monster that could tank anything, and the only thing that could chip her down was backup attacks. Oh, but wait, eventually you can get Corrin's pair-up ability and inherit that to her, and then she becomes invincible. Like, I was never in any danger of losing from that point on because Tamara could just tank forever. It was hilarious. She is an awesome unit.
Bye-bye I fight for my friends.
The biggest reservation I have about her in Fae is that I'm just very concerned that she will just be Brave Dimitri 2, the sequel, stronger than ever, and she will have infinite defense and tank everything forever and will be a horrible monster to deal with. But you know what? She deserves it because she's very cool. But yeah, in terms of plus 10, I really don't want to plus 10 a second Lance unit that scales on defense. That's too similar for my tastes. But if we got her as like a seasonal with like a axe or something, I think that would be really cool. So overall, very cool character. Looking forward to her a lot. Not sure that I'll rush out to plus 10 her just because of that overlap with Dimitri, but I think that she is incredibly underrated. I think she's generally fun, but she's also pretty level-headed when she needs to be, and she has an interesting approach to doing things, like trying to get people to relax by just scaring them by making them ride wolves. Just overall fun character. Her retainers are Marin and Panette. Let's start with Panette, because I don't really have a lot to say about her. I don't like her design. I didn't really care for her personality. There's nothing that really stood out to me. At least she didn't say anything that like grossed me out or anything, like talking about eating eyeballs, so there's that. She goes in D tier. I don't really care much for her. And by contrast, we have Marin. Before the game dropped, she was one of the designs that I actually did like. I think she's got kind of a cute design. She's an animal lover, which is a fun trait. And riding a wolf into battle is just really awesome. I think it's interesting that her support with Alir is one of the few times Alir gets genuinely upset with an ally, even if it's really brief. I think that adds a little bit of extra dynamicism to their support line. And actually, speaking of her support with Alir, I like how it's partially centered on writing, in her case writing a book about rare critters. Something that, again, I felt I was kind of cheated out of with Jade's support. Overall, I could definitely see using Marin if I did a future run, but she's kind of like those other dagger units where I liked them, but I just didn't really care for daggers that much, and it kind of held them back. I ended up benching her. But overall, I do like Marin. I don't think I'd pull for her specifically in Fae, though, unless we got like a demoted version. But A Cavalry Dagger Seasonal Marin sounds super rad if they ever did that. I could definitely see her as like a seasonal Blue Dagger demote riding around on her wolf. That would be kind of fun, and I'd be interested in maybe plus 10ing her in that case. I'll put her in B tier with her other dagger units that just barely didn't make the cut. For our second Psalm Royal, we have Tamara's younger brother, Fogado, who is my favorite royal. He was my favorite of all the royals. He is just super cool. I like his personality a lot. It's fun and relaxed, but he also does work hard to support his sister. He's just super supportive. I found all his supports really endearing, how much he's trying to genuinely lift people up and make them realize how cool they are when they think that he's cool. Like, his support with Clan was great. His support with Alchrist was great. Really, Fogado's awesome. I loved him a lot. And also, he's got really beautiful eyes. Oh my goodness. I think Tamara has the same eyes, but I noticed it first with Fogado because you actually encounter him first. And I saw him and I was just like, oh my god, his eyes are gorgeous. Yeah, Fogado's incredible. I'm still very sad that we didn't get Ash as a cavalry bow unit. But if I can't have Cav Bow Ash, if I can get plus 10 Fogado eventually, I'd consider that a fair enough trade. So, Fogado, absolutely awesome character. Really enjoyed using him. Also, he didn't overlap with Alchrist as much as I expected because Alchrist had Luna, while Fogado didn't have as good of a skill for his class, but he did have that cavalry movement. And instead, he has enough magic that I used Radiant Bow on him, and he ended up doing pretty well. So, overall, really liked Fogado. He is an easy A tier, and he is at the top of A tier. His retainers are Pandreo and Bunei. Alright, people really like Pandreo. I think he's okay. I didn't get to use him a whole lot, which is probably why I didn't like fall in love with him or anything. He seems alright. His support with Alir was cute, but other than that, I just don't love like his design or anything. I already had magic units and staff units at that point, so I didn't really need another one. I had Clan, I had Ivy, so he just kind of, I think, mostly suffered from late join time where it was like, yeah, my team is mostly finalized at this point, so don't really have a reason to experiment too much with him. Yeah, his design is okay. It's not something that I love, but it's not something I hate either. I'm going to put him in C tier. I think I like him a little more than Hortensia at base, and that could potentially go up if I saw the rest of his supports. But as it is, I think he's okay. And Bunei is weird. He is just always talking about licking people. Not wild about that. Kind of uncomfortable. It's a shame. I kind of liked his design, and I liked the idea of him being a chef. But I think he leans on that too much to the point that I didn't really get much of a character from him beyond the fact that he's the chef. He likes food. I don't know. I wish there was a little more there, and I wish he wasn't as weird about it. I put him in the lower C tier. Definitely not my favorite, not the worst character or anything, but he's okay. Finally, to finish off Psalm, we have Sadal the Dancer. Automatically, he is fantastic just because of being a dancer. But I also kind of liked his design. Having a male dancer is nice. That's not something we get too often in the series. And him also being a fortune teller is kind of an interesting addition to that. So he got a lot of use there. I think he also had some kind of cute supports with like Tamara and Alir, where they're kind of encouraging him to just kind of live a little and not be so strict with his dancing training regimen, where he kind of denies himself eating a lot of the foods that he likes. So I don't know, I thought those were nice, if a little repetitive. I also liked his one with Rosado where he's trying to find out his beauty routine. That was funny. Overall, Sadal was pretty cool. I'd put him in A tier. Alright, now we've got the last of the cast, and we're going to also add in NPC characters. So this is where we're getting into more spoiler territory, so again, spoiler warning for anyone who hasn't completed the game. Our last two recruitable characters are Mavier and Vale. We'll go ahead and start with Mavier. So he is one of the 4 hounds and is someone who turns traitor against them and joins your cause. He's a very stoic and silent knight and is honestly, at least at first glance, probably the most boring of the hounds. He's very subdued. He doesn't talk a whole lot compared to the rest of the hounds having very hammy, over-the-top personalities and interacting with you much more earlier on, being much more in your face. Mavier does stand out in that sense. So funny enough, his lack of presence makes him a little bit more memorable amongst a cast of hammy villains. But yeah, he doesn't really seem that interesting at first glance, and he is a design that I wouldn't really normally care much about. He's like a bigger, stronger type of guy, and he's got like a beard, which is not something I generally like. Something else that I found surprising about the fact I like Vander so much is I don't normally like the guys with the beards and the mustaches. No, thank you. Not the type for me. But Mavier has a shockingly good character arc for how rushed it is. It's kind of condensed into just a few chapters, but what they do with the time they give him is really good, and it felt pretty believable. And I ended up liking him way more than I expected to. I do have a soft spot for kind of like the loyal knight type of characters, which is probably part of why I really liked Vander as well. The kind of characters who really just has this person that they want to protect no matter the cost to themselves or anything else. I ended up liking Mavier way more than I expected to. I'm going to put him in A tier. Right at the bottom of A tier, I think. Yeah, I really like the loyal knight dynamic he has. And he has really nice, very sweet supports with characters about him trying to reconcile with his past actions and trying to atone for that, and trying to find his place in the group, earn people's trust knowing that they probably don't care much for him. But the way that he does bring characters around to appreciating him is really cool. You see that with like Ivy, Alir, and especially like Vander. I really liked his one with Vander, the A support there, where he talks about how he wants to understand Queen Lumera and make up for his role in events and everything through that, and kind of carry on her legacy, was so sweet. I really enjoyed that. So anyway, Mavier A tier. And then finally, last of the playable characters, we have Lady Vale, who, well, she's even harder to talk about without dropping massive spoilers, huh? I had a really big roller coaster with her. Without getting into it too much, I liked her initially. I was like, yeah, she's probably going to be kind of the character who's super plot relevant, and they try and act like, oh, she's just a mysterious girl, but anytime it's just a mysterious girl, they end up being super important, right? You know, it's something that's not super hard to see coming, and I think most of the twists with her are pretty predictable, but I think they did a pretty good job of kind of making those twists feel pretty believable, and her relationship with the characters is pretty sweet once you actually get into her supports and everything. Yeah, I didn't like her a lot during the middle section, but like alongside when the other characters start to forgive her, I think that's when I started to forgive her too. So overall, I did like Vale. She's not my favorite character by any means, but I liked her well enough. I'll put her at the top of B tier, just below Mavier. She just barely misses A tier. I think I liked Mavier just slightly more. So with that takes care of our playable cast. Next, let's go ahead and quickly go over the NPCs. I guess since we just did kind of the baddie squad, let's go ahead and round out the rest of the 4 hounds, consisting of Marnie, Zephia, and Gris. Let's go ahead and start with Marnie. She is the one we see most often with Mavier. I liked her the most of the hounds pre-release, looking at just designs alone. I thought her design was pretty cute, and she definitely did not strike me as an armor knight, but that's what she was. Overall, pretty cool character. I can kind of appreciate the fact that she just really wants to get praise. She has kind of a sad backstory, and her actions are very important to the plot, and I ended up liking her a good bit. I'd put her in B tier. I'd put her right between Kagetsu and Marin. I really wish she had been playable, And I know you can get the alternate versions of the hounds via DLC, but it's just not quite the same, you know? Next up, we have Gris, who is an interesting guy. He very much enjoys pain. He likes being hit. He likes hitting you. Inflicting or giving pain, he's all about that. He's a weird little guy. He's very over the top. I find him entertaining. He's not my favorite by any means, but I'd put him in C tier. And he does offer some insight into his surprisingly interesting backstory near the end of his screen time. I wish we had gotten to see a little bit more of that, but overall I enjoyed him. So we'll put him just below Hortensia. And then finally we have Zephyia, the antagonist that I would say, interact with the most. And she is very interesting. She's kind of a despicable character, but you can also kind of see why she does what she does, and kind of sympathize with her. Kind of the issue with a lot of the characters, though, is that she does have kind of pacing issues on her story. Hers is kind of similar to Gris, kind of just dumped at the end. And I'd honestly say that was kind of an issue with Marnie as well, is that kind of everyone of the hounds had their backstory kind of mentioned just kind of at the end. I wish we'd gotten a little more of that throughout instead of just shoved in at the last second. But Zephyia was interesting. She's pretty complex in her motivations and the reasons why she'll do one thing and then kind of contradict herself the next minute. I don't know, I liked her. Even though her design wasn't something I was initially too keen on, she's interesting. I'd put her actually right between Gris and Hortensia. I'd put her in C as well. All right, with the hounds taken care of, let's hit the rulers of the various countries. We'll start with Queen Lumera. She is Alir's mom, and you know what that means. I think she might be the current record holder for the Fire Emblem parent any percent speedrun. Yeah, we all knew it was coming. I think they didn't even try and hide it in pre-release trailers. I think they just straight up showed that she does the Fire Emblem parent thing very quickly, even faster than Mikoto, who was already very fast. It's a shame because Lumera is so sweet in the little screen time that she had. I already liked Mikoto, but I think that Lumera does an even better job of getting her character across in the short time that she is in the story. I think you can definitely see just how much she cares about Alir. And even though I knew it was coming, it did make me a little sad when it happened. But she's got such a sweet, kind personality. Her legacy, you can definitely feel throughout, especially like through Vander's supports. He talks about her a lot. The emblems bring her up a lot. She's just such a sweet character and such a good mom. I really appreciate her. And we actually do get to see more of her later on. Through like flashbacks and stuff. So she doesn't even stop being relevant beyond those first few chapters, which I also really enjoy. Her design is also so gorgeous, and her art for Faye is also really amazing. And best of all, she was a free unit. So all of this kind of brings her into S tier. She is rounding out the S tier at the bottom of it, but still making it in. And really what I think pushes her ahead is that she is already in Faye and easy to build. So I guess take this as the announcement that I will eventually be interested in building Lumera once I figure out a build for her. But very happy with Mom. She is a cool character. I liked her a lot. For the royals of the various countries, starting things off, we have Queen Eve from Firene. And she's okay in her debut. She doesn't have a lot of screen time, but she does make a decently strong first impression for an NPC in her debut, where she kind of just glares the enemy into submission, kind of has a good amount of control on the situation despite being taken hostage. So I find that interesting that she's a pretty strong character, but beyond that, she doesn't get much screen time, so I don't have a whole lot to say. She just slides into C tier. She's all right. She's cool, but I wish we'd seen more of her. And actually, let's skip over to Solm, because Queen Sephoria, Tamara and Fogato's mom, I feel the same about. She's a cool character. I wish we had gotten to see more of her. I think she's got my favorite design of the 4 countries royals. But I really like how like strong she presents in her little bit of screen time. Again, just I wish we had seen more of her. She also slides into C with Queen Ev. Next we have the two kings who got a little bit more screen time, but still didn't get a ton of it, but they are the more plot relevant characters. So those are King Morian and King Hyacinth. Let's start with King Morian. So King Morian is actually really cool. I was very taken aback, much like I was with his son Diamant. He's this strong military guy, and you can definitely see some of that kind of toxic mindset that his country has in him, where he just really values strength. But at the same time, we get to see Morian the leader, and we also get to see Morian the family man. And Morian the family man is such a delight. For the few scenes that we actually get to see that aspect of him, he totally steals the show. He is such a delight to see the way he interacts with his family and how much he cares for Diamant and Alchrist is just so wonderful. It's always so refreshing when we get to see a father who genuinely loves and cares for their children, because I feel like it's still a rare thing in media, but it's something I really liked about Papa Geralt, and it's something I also really loved here. Morian is such a cool character, and much like the queens, I wish we'd gotten to see more of him, but Morian has a role in the story that he fulfills very well, and I grew very attached to him in that brief time that we got to see him. And I was like constantly, every time he was on screen, I was like cheering for him. I was like, Morian, you've got this. I want to see you win. And so I felt that was just super cool. I ended up liking him way more than I expected. Really, the main thing that holds him back is just the fact that he doesn't get that screen time. But despite all that, I loved him so much that I want to put him in A tier. If we got him as a Grand Hero Battle unit and we got to see Morian the family man in Fae, I would be all in on that, and I would be very excited to plus 10 him. So A tier, King Morian, love him. Finally, we have King Hyacinth, who is the basically the antagonist of the early story, and his actions are kind of a driving force of the plot, but we don't get to see too much of him himself. I'd put him in C along with the queens. He's like he's more plot relevant than them, but he's also not as cool of a character as them, so I think that kind of balances out. Based off of what tidbits we get from Ivy and Hortensia, he used to be a good guy, so kind of reminds me of Garen in that sense. Also, I do think his first boss fight is pretty cool, so there's that. But overall, he's probably a gimmick Grand Hero Battle unit out of 10, so there's that. Finally, to end our list off, we have the Fell Dragon Sombron, the overall main antagonist. And boy, this guy's kind of goofy looking. He's just a little hard, like, he's got this eye that's kind of twitching all over the place in cutscenes. It makes him a little hard to take seriously sometimes, but he is a pretty intimidating presence, and he's a pretty despicable villain. They really made him, we don't necessarily see, but what we hear of the atrocities that he committed makes him very despicable, which makes it more satisfying to fight him and try and stop him. When he's on screen, he's usually a pretty intimidating presence, and I really appreciate that. He's not necessarily the most fleshed out antagonist in the series or anything, but we do get a good info dump of his motivations near the very end of the game. Again, like the other villains, I wish we had gotten more of that spread throughout, but I did enjoy Sombron as an antagonist. Now, I wouldn't want to plus 10 him or anything, but if we got like a mythic Sombron as like a dark mythic, I would want at least one copy of him, because I think he's just a cool antagonist, even if he's a little on the basic side and not the most engaging character. I do think he is cool. So I'm going to put him in C tier, roughly in the middle, I would say. He does a good enough job, I would say, of being an antagonist that I really want to fight and take down. Though the biggest thing actually I would say is his final boss sucks. It is so easy. It is laughably easy. It's like they designed the boss fight and then they added the emblem mechanic and then they forgot to go back and adjust his boss fight for you having emblems and being able to stomp him. His boss fight is laughably easy. I don't know what went wrong. Most of the maps up till that point were balanced really well with the emblems in mind, and then the final boss is just a joke. I don't know what happened. It was a very disappointing final boss. It only took a long time because I wanted to get all the unique dialogue, but other than that, kind of sad about that. I wish his boss fight was better. Maybe it's harder and maddening, but in hard mode, it was laughable. Oh, but wait, we forgot one character. The most important character. How could I forget? It is, of course, Sami Salami! Ah, Sami is so adorable. How could anyone hate this little guy? Of course, Sami Salami goes in S tier. That's why it's S. So this is my list of all of the major characters. I think I might have missed a few minor NPCs and named bosses, but they really didn't make enough of an impact that I would care about them. So this is all the characters I felt were relevant to rank. And I'm not ranking them in this, but I did want to say that I really appreciated all the emblems as well. Even ones that I didn't know much going in, like Sigurd, and ones that I didn't like prior to this, like Celica and Erica, I ended up liking all of them. So yeah, all the emblems were really cool, and I think that has improved my opinion on some of the characters. But Byleth is still the best one, though. He's SSS tier, best character in the game. Anyway. So, overall thoughts for this, I was surprised how much of this game's cast I ended up really enjoying. While I didn't like any of them as much as my faves from, say, Three Houses, I had a much higher number of favorites overall. Like, the top 14 characters were the ones I used, but all of those are characters I could see plus 10ing. Shockingly, we had 2 NPCs that also made the top tiers, and then even beyond the top characters that I used, we still had some characters that I really liked. And funny enough, there weren't even any F tiers, which I really expected there to be at least one, but there was no one in this game that I outright hated, which is where I would put them if they were F tiered. At worst, they were characters I didn't like or I was indifferent to. So I found that very surprising. I would say this game's cast is fairly consistent. It's not as high of highs as characters from like Three Houses, but it's also not as low of lows, with really bad characters that I really didn't like. I wish the story was as consistent as the cast was, but overall, I really enjoyed this group of characters, and I'm glad that it subverted my initial expectations where I didn't really find myself intrigued by most of the cast. But anyway, that was a very long video. I apologize for the rambling, but I really just had a lot of thoughts about so many of these characters that I wanted to get out, so thank you guys for watching and listening to me ramble so long. Let me know which characters were your standout favorites in the comments down below, and until next time, this is Hoodie Angel Brandon, signing out.